Your light.
It's live.
Is your light?
Good thing you know what you're doing.
We're live.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the Clean Community Police Commission Training Committee. It's now 18:06 hours or 6:06 p.m. Welcome to all here present and on the video. We'll have a roll call. Commissioner Adams.
Present.
Commissioner Reaves.
Present.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Present.
And Commissioner Chura is present also. Our first role of business will be the selection of a chair. Is there anyone that wishes to nominate themselves for this position?
I would like to nominate myself.
Do you want to add me before we do the
I was
chair?
about to say that too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You just want to announce that I'm adding.
And we also have Commissioner Benito here. Present.
Present, thank you. And I just, for the public, we had a discussion at yesterday's accountability committee where it was brought up that there was interest in focusing on mental health and crisis intervention for training. And so as someone who's focused on mental health and crisis and as the liaison to the mental health response advisory committee, I had a conversation with Commissioner Adams and said that if there was space on the committee, then I'd be interested in joining. And the committee has been so kind as to allow me to join. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be added.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Adams wishes to run for the chair. Anyone else?
I wanted to nominate you,
Um,
Mr. Chura, for chair. Am I allowed to do that?
I appreciate it, but I think I'd be a little too busy
Okay.
at times. Thank you, though.
He is available for pro tem, so when you need him.
Anyone else?
I did just want to say, even though I don't know if anyone else is going to throw their hat in the ring, but I do think that I wasn't really considering myself to even be on this committee. But I actually think that this is maybe one of the best fits for my skill set. We will essentially be doing a lot of curriculum and lesson plans. And as an educator, I feel like those tasks are right in my wheelhouse. So just to clarify why I felt like it was a good fit to run for chair.
You don't have to have a vote. You can just ask if there's any opposition to it. If, for the record, if not, then.
For the record, is there any opposition to having Dr. John Adams appointed to our chair of this committee?
No opposition, just wanted to say that I think you're a perfect fit for chair of this committee and I look forward to your leadership.
Okay,
So
I guess I will now relinquish the gavel.
I want you to go ahead and run. No, I want you to finish running the meeting, and then just finish running the meeting. I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
Roll.
On our next item of business, we have the Committee for Strategic Planning Overview, CPC Framework and Committee Budget Report, which would be by Director Gregory.
I have one, yeah, I didn't bring it, but I know about it. Everybody got one?
All right.
That's the same thing for
So some of you have seen this presentation already, but I'm going to go through it for the members that haven't. So just bear with me, because for those who are first timers, they might glean something out of this. It should be
Oh,
coming
there we
in.
go. It's warming up.
So, real quickly on the, what you're looking at here is the Police Commission operational framework. It's pursuant to CPC rule we passed mandating that we will have a document beginning in our second year. We'll make a good faith effort to share a strategic framework with the community and stakeholders each year no later than January 31st. This framework shall contain objectives and priorities for the following year, including any audits of performance or planned major policy work. The Commission shall solicit community feedback in the months leading to the development of the plan to ensure that the objectives of the Commission continue to align with the needs and the concerns of various communities in Cleveland. The framework does not limit what can be done in a year, and the Commission reserves the right to add or remove work from its framework should a need arise. So basically, we're committing ourselves to being transparent and forward-facing and holding ourselves accountable to a general framework for what we will accomplish as a strategic planning document here, that the community can see, that the division can see, that the court can see. So it provides us a roadmap. So it's for committees to use to help plan their work and then feed that work into a master document where we will prioritize how we deploy our resources over basically in quarters. So the framework for this one particularly, I suggest we do 18 months because it'll bring us to the end of people who are here for 2-year terms. They'll know what they're working on for that time period and be able to be focused. And then also it fits nicely since we have 6 months left in this year, so we can just tell everyone we're going to work on. So on the second page of this is just a planning guide for commissioners to use in committees. It aims to create a working plan that facilitates excellent execution of the commission's duties, right? So we want to hold ourselves accountable, say what we're going to do and do what we want to say, and carry that out to the best of our ability so the public can understand what we're up to. We use a concept called management by objectives in this planning thing. The planning process pairs objectives with key anticipated results to measure what matters to us, right? So what we're looking on. So there's 3 components to it: the objectives, the results, and then if we need a budget component. Some projects may require additional cost. If we're doing a survey or we need to bring in a consultant on a particular topic, we would need to plan for that. The budget cycle, usually we need to know that in the early summer, around August, what we're going to spend for next year. So if we're going to do any major projects in any committee, then we need to know that and plan for it through the committee, get that in the budget. You were all part of a very quick budget process in the beginning of your terms, but this time around we can be a little slower and more deliberate in planning our budget for next year. But we should have that to the city to review by at least in August at some point. So it'll happen rather quickly. So committees need to have an eye on if they think there's a major project they want to undertake, get some outside expertise for this group for a particular curriculum or whatever, and we want to pay for services for that. I always recommend using what we have available, using community members to amplify that. They've always been willing to volunteer their time and expertise. But if we have to, occasionally we do have to spend some money to reach our objectives in a timely way and supplement our manpower. So how do we set our objectives? It's a pretty simple process. What are we going to, we say what we're going to do. We say why we're going to do it. And we should be really compelling in why we're doing it, right? Justify it. And then we say how we're going to do it. And where do we plan our objectives from? So we have a couple of points that we need to be aware of. One, we have the mandates of the consent decree, the paragraphs that guide the commission's work. Right now, we're not in compliance with those. Remember, we were reset when you guys came on, the new commission was seated. They took us back to starting from square one on our consent decree compliance, but with a good plan, I feel like we can get there in 6 months, maybe a little longer than that. So that's on the next page, and we'll hit that in a minute. We also have everything available to us in Charter Section 115.5, which is more than 13 people can work on, plus the staff of 5 in a year, right? So we have to be selective in our strategic planning of what in those duties we do and when we do it, particularly with training. We have to look at, we'll skip down to, and I'm sorry, the numbers need to be corrected here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. But particularly the Cleveland Division of Police, training review work plans, right? So Commander Maguth is with us here now, they have to put a lot of legwork into planning their training for the next year in advance. So this committee, it's really important to get in on that early, and add what you think is important and the community thinks is important or is mandated in the consent decree for us, right, into what they're already working on as best as you can work it out, right? So that's going to require a considerable amount of coordination with the training review committee and this committee to really align your priorities over the next 18 months. So, you guys can review this, but you set your results simply, and, the objectives should be significant, simple, concrete, action-oriented, and support our values and mission and time-oriented. So, that's just kind of something to go back to look at.
Jason, may I add, to the chair,
Oh, let's get a mic.
Where is our mic here?
so I added this to the, meeting last night, and I need to add it to this week as well, that, the new, lead monitors out of Washington DC came in a week ago Friday and invited, Adriana, our co-chair, and me to a meeting, talked about a lot of things in terms of our progress, reminding us about the same topics that our executive director has mentioned, as far as being able to move out of those dark areas to show that we've made some progress during this last 6 months. But they did share with us that the Judge Oliver, has helped to identify 3 areas that should be included in any discussion about priorities. So those 3 areas that they would like to see us make some progress in, and they pretty much are in line with what's here. But the 3 are search and seizure is one, use of force, and CIT training. Those are the 3 that. Beg pardon?
Oh, no, I'm saying, did I just see that today somewhere? Was that in the email?
I don't
Did you
know.
watch the video?
To watch a video from yesterday, it was talk.
We talked about it in the video yesterday. The same information I'm sharing with you tonight, I shared with them yesterday. So as you begin to look at priorities, just make sure that, and I think they're gonna sync anyway with what's there, but just make sure that you include those 3, since those priorities are being identified by Judge Oliver in the consent decree. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did we also talk about like a 4th community survey yesterday?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and so yes,
I did that last.
at those of you who are in the outreach committee, it was brought up, Ryan did a presentation. So annually we do a outreach survey. So that's one of the things, how do we get community feedback to help design our plan for the next 18 months, what's important to them. One of the things the monitor, I guess, told the co-chairs is they really would like to see us do another survey, so we are geared to do that. We have the tools to do it. It'll be under outreach's purview to help set that up. Other committee members can jump in and to make sure that committee's interests are represented in those questions, right? We don't want to give the community survey fatigue, but we'll do our best to tailor it down. In the past, we were confined to only asking questions specifically to the consent decree, right? But we are now under 115.5 able to broaden that out a little more and design it the way that we feel to get expressions back from the community in what they expect of us in the next year, right? So I'm hoping we can get that out in the next 60 days with a little bit of hard work on the part of us to design it, plan it, and get it moving. So, but Ryan, if you didn't see that, I encourage you to go to the outreach committee meeting, which was 2 weeks ago. Watch Ryan's presentation. He talks about that survey a little bit to the group. All right. So moving along here, the compliance page is just that. So this is paragraphs right out of the consent decree that mandate what we have to do. Paragraph 15 through 23. And as you can see here, we're in non-compliance with the majority of those paragraphs. And so what I did here is just preliminarily, right, take a stab at what committee might want to tackle that. It's not a commitment. I don't have the power to mandate committees, take these things on. But it generally makes sense because some of these paragraphs are very specific, like around training, it'll say assess the training, right? So obviously the right fit would be if it mandates that we assess a training or are part of a training, then it would fall to this committee's purview. So it makes sense. You can take a look at this here. The one here, for instance, assist as appropriate in development of training related to bias-free policing and cultural competency, right? So obviously the right place for that is in the training committee. That's how I did that. There is flexibility there. It doesn't mean that other committees can't jump in and assist. It's just kind of a generalized, keep this in mind as you set your policies, your strategic planning that feeds into this. Look at this and see if you agree with it, and then try and work that in as an objective. So that's the gist of this document. It's been shared with everybody. So what it'll look like here is each committee has its own page here where we list our projects, right? We set the objectives. We set a deadline based on a quarter, right? So we're going to aim for quarters because it gives us a little flexibility. And then we're going to say what we expect to achieve. And then if we have a budget request, and then the committee will prioritize its work and make any notes. And then once I have a document from each of the committees that has their projects listed, their timeframes over the next 18 months, any budget requests, we'll feed that into a master document. The co-chairs and I will analyze it and do our best to prioritize it, and then we'll send it to the main group for a vote, and then we'll send that out to the public as our guiding compass for the next 18 months. So that's kind of how this works. If there's any questions.
I have one quick question. Have we ever given out like a survey to the division members to maybe get their input on where they could?
Yeah. So that's a great question, Commissioner Chura. It's an interesting way that we got there too. So the first year we did the survey, right? We actually, I think we had more respondents that were police officers than were community members, or it was close, right? We had a large amount of police officers, right? And it was like, it was interesting how we got there. It doesn't matter, but the second year we weren't able to replicate that, right? Because in the first year, I think the officers wanted to see what we were asking, so a lot of them took it just to see what's up with this thing.
Yeah.
But the problem was we didn't gear it. We didn't have a bifurcation where you identify yourself as an officer and then you take a different track. Same questions, right? But geared towards officers. Like, do you observe this in your partners? Do you feel your training is adequate in these areas, right? We were asking questions so it was a little bit weird. The data didn't quite line up, but there was a good officer response. And yes, particularly for training, and I think the division does this, and the commander can talk, they already do ask training questions like, where do we want to go? What areas can we improve in? But, there may be something, they may say something different to us than they feel comfortable saying internally. So it doesn't hurt to also continue to bifurcate and ask if you are an officer, to share experiences with us. So, yes, great question. Any other questions on this? All right.
Next item on the agenda is Cleveland Division of Police Review Committee Training Report is out. With any members of the division present, Commander or Lieutenant, want to give us a quick overview for the public also watching?
Sure. Yeah, so the training review committee met. I invited the commission members who attended. This was essentially like the revitalization of it because we were kind of stalemated while we were waiting for kind of the commission to reform. So we kind of met. We discussed some of the, some of the priorities, some of the things that we are looking to achieve within that committee, how the review process is kind of being formulated and implemented within the division, and where we kind of want to take the review committee. One of them was structured through a general police order that you've learned about. A draft was provided to kind of elicit some feedback, as well as a curriculum review sheet. So whenever we have curriculum provided to the training review committee, this curriculum sheet would kind of standardize the review process of it to ensure we're hitting the key points. So that was provided to the training review committees for feedback. So the feedback has been received and it's kind of being incorporated into the document, will be reshared. So it's kind of the update where it stands. To date, there's been a couple curriculums, subject control, health and wellness, and a district training awareness refresher that's been provided to the training review committee for some feedback.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any other new business?
Well, I have a question. No, you go first.
I just wanted to, because Commissioner Reaves and I with Edie Goodrich was at the meeting, but just a couple of things. that I just wanted to say is that I do remember from the meeting in my notes that Commander Magoo just wanted to be clear that there's going to be an emphasis on content on this committee, and that one of the issues that was brought up in our meeting, and why I'm happy that Commissioner Benito joined the committee, is that Commander Magoo mentioned that the needs assessment was critical, and that one of the things that we also have to consider is that we also have to be concerned with the mental health of the officers. And so I know that Commander Magoo was trying to figure out a file sharing system for us. I'm not sure if that has been, I guess, figured out yet. But last thing I wanted to say, just from the notes that I wrote down, I remember that we talked about the mental health, and I know that there was some concern from the commissioners after we reported back from that meeting that there was some interest in sort of looking at the treatment of Black girls in their interactions with officers. And so I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
And to the Chair Pro Tem, and also to the Chair-elect, we do have something you may want to discuss and try to take a stab at resolving. So having more than 2 commissioners attend the training review would technically be a quorum at the meeting, right? So you may want to work out a schedule. How often are the TRCs going to occur?
At least quarterly.
Quarterly. Yeah. So who, assigning who is going to go as the reps from this committee to the TRCs, might be something, and you don't have to address it today, but it is something for this committee to consider, is how will we attend those, right?
If anyone is interested in sort of being the TRC liaison, I guess you can speak now, or
I do
you
feel
can
like
just let me
you,
know.
as the chair, should be one of the people who goes.
I'm willing to go, but I also believe that as chair, I will be in the loop on everything that's going on in the committee. So if there was the more knowledgeable commissioners are and involved, the better. So I'm willing to do it if that's what you all would want, but I'm also willing to take a step back and allow 2 other commissioners to do it, because I'm going to talk to you anyway and find out what happened. So I would prefer to spread, everything around.
Yeah, I would be willing to go.
Having a background in law enforcement and mental health, I would definitely want to be a part of it.
So we can, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Commissioner.
Through the Chair Pro Tem and
Commissioner Ridgway.
Commissioner Adams. Explain to me, you mentioned that one of the focus points would be girls. Did you say that when you all talked about that?
When we reported back at our full meeting, and I know that that came up from a commissioner. I didn't write down who said it. It was just in my notes. But I just wanted to for Commander Magoo, I just wanted to kind of just put that out there because it came up in a meeting. I don't think he attended.
I recall that also, Commissioner Adams. There was actually like a video on it, I believe. Commissioner Benito.
Thank you. I also wanted to report out to one of the subcommittees of MRAC, and it's again just for everybody. MRAC stands for Mental Health Response Advisory Committee, which is one of the committees that, like us, was formed, was created as part of the consent decree. They have a training subcommittee, and this training subcommittee is who kind of develops the CIT. Has kind of jurisdiction over the development of that, and then also the annual in-service. There's always some sort of crisis intervention and service that is added to the division's training every year. And so this year, the in-service training that they're all doing is suicide and suicide intervention. And so I believe that has been well underway. And then they are looking at potential topics for next year's in-service. And so there is a survey that they're getting ready to put out to officers. And it had a few different, I was trying to look through my email to try to find exactly what it was, but some of the ones were trauma, understanding trauma and the impact of trauma on people. Another one was people on the autism spectrum. Another topic was youth. And then there were a few others that I can look back through my notes and send out. And then so that will be sent out to officers to kind of indicate which area they're interested in. And then that training, and then the training subcommittee will either look for good existing trainings or actually develop a training that will then, that gets approved by OPATA. So is that how you say it, OPATA? Okay. So there's that. The other thing that they're doing is that they are getting ready to do a crisis intervention training for dispatchers. I think that's like another thing. It's obviously do we have any jurisdiction over dispatch?
That's an interesting question. We don't have an answer for that, but it did come up in relation to that case that was sent to us,
Right.
and also was on NPR several days ago, right? So, and Commander Magoo, do you guys handle the training curriculum for the dispatch office as well?
So as of now, we will. Recently, we've been receiving the dispatcher training to review through the training review committee. But where it comes to like the training plan and the needs assessment, we do not consider communications in that. They actually have their own internal kind of like trainers that handle that aspect. So we don't include it in that plan.
So, and the reason why that is so important to think about dispatchers as part of crisis intervention, and especially the coordination of the crisis intervention team, is that dispatchers are the ones who have to identify that, hey, this is a crisis situation that we should try to get our CIT trained officers there. And so sometimes people, members of the public who are maybe more in the know might actually specifically ask dispatcher, can you please send a crisis officer or a CIT officer? But a lot of times the dispatchers have to use their judgment in the situation to identify this is a crisis, because the person who's in crisis might not be able to articulate that they're in a crisis. And so it's especially important in that area that dispatch is working with officers. And so that is another report out from what that committee is working on. I am going to be reaching out to the head of that subcommittee. Her name's Carol Ballard, and she is she's the person from the Adams Board, which is the addiction and mental health board of Cuyahoga County. And I will be reaching out to set up a meeting with her. So she's heavily involved in that. And then another kind of reminder is we are able to send some commissioners to the CIT training this fall. Do you remember the date? Oh, I'm sure you guys
One
do.
in October, one in November.
Correct. I wouldn't.
Yeah, so there's one in October, one in November. And so it could be a great opportunity for some folks on this committee to attend if you're able to. The only thing is you do have to attend all 40 hours. So I know that can be hard for folks who are working full time. So I think that is all of that. I do have some questions I would love to ask our esteemed guests if there's time, but I'll stop myself for now.
So the October training is the 23rd through the 27th. It's a full 40-week training.
And in case that wasn't heard on the record, it's October 23rd through the 27th.
Are those meetings like a work day? Like
Yeah, it's a
all day?
work day. So what they asked is if anyone wanted to attend the full crisis intervention training curriculum that the officers received who are, and it's the specialized training, correct? So the 40-hour is the specialized. That means you're getting that special designation as a CIT trained officer. So you will be going through the exact same classroom experience as the officers.
Any other questions or concerns?
Well, I would love to ask a question, Commander Magoo's and then also Lieutenant Smith, if you have anything you want to add. So as we kind of begin this training committee journey, I would love to ask you guys, what do you think you've seen in terms of trainings that have happened in the division that have had a noticeable impact on operations within the division, so that changed functioning or changed culture in the division? And what were some of the elements that you see in those types of training? Because I think that one thing you see some debate on in the community, and even in some of the research, is how much training does change what actually happens on the street. And I also know that officers go through a lot of different trainings, and there can sometimes be training fatigue. And so I was just curious to get your perspective on that, and what are the things that you really see making a real difference?
I'll do my best to remember the whole question. What I'll do is I'll break it up. I'll let Lieutenant Smith talk about the recruit aspect. He's a lot more familiar in that. I'll talk about the annual in-service and maybe some of the supervisory training that's changed. And I think the most significant thing in 2017 is where we started really integrating scenario-based training through videos, be it role plays. That's where we probably saw the biggest change, where we started changing our use of force. Prior to that, it was just a regular exam, right? You would take an exam and that would be it. Where this actually put you through a scenario, it actually assessed you in the modules. And I think that the way we broke it down, that it was a really good way to teach the new policy, how the policy had been changed. And I think that the division now has adopted that. They understand this reality base, this integrated reality base, or the scenario learning. They're starting to accept it more, right? Especially with our younger officers that are coming through. So I think we've really started to incorporate some of these adult learning theory into our training, which maybe was kind of absent in the past. It was more just the lecture approach, right? So that's where we saw some of it. Some of the other things is we worked with some outside vendors, right? We have some partnerships with MRAC to help develop some of the training for the division. Prior, a lot of it was just kind of through the state of Ohio or just developed internally. So we've kind of reached outside of that. Another thing with supervisory training, right? That's where we're going to start using our own integrated, like our own body worn cameras to train on. And to my knowledge, many other cities are kind of reluctant to do that. They won't do that, but we've kind of taken that step to look at our own internal incidents, and both good and bad, right? We're highlighting the successes so we can capitalize on them, but we're also looking at some areas where maybe we can improve on, especially for our supervisors, because we know it's critical when they're coming in to manage some of these incidents, as well as adopting some of the additional problem-solving methods. Through one of the trainings is leadership in police organizations, and it kind of teaches this leadership thought process and how to analyze and address perhaps problems within individuals, groups, to organizations, right? And I think that that's a training that has a high emphasis from the upper level and kind of really pushing its way through the division. So those are some of the areas through supervisory, annual in-service training that we see, and I'll let Lieutenant Smith kind of talk about the recruit aspect.
I just wanted to piggyback on a couple of things the commander said. The reality-based training, the hands-on type training, they are expecting it now from us. That's what they see, and they are comprehending more. And one of the other significant changes is de-escalation training, and taking the time and slowing it down. Because prior to the new policy and the new training, because the calls keep stacking up, everybody, we got to rush through. But now it's slowing it down, and everybody's taking their time to understand what's happening, and it's making a difference in the safety of officers and the citizens out there. So that's one big noticeable difference. With the recruit training, we always had some sort of adult learning theory, because the state always taught adult learning theory, but we incorporated more hands-on with the recruits so they can understand what applying the book knowledge to actually what they're going to learn in the street. So we moved from when I came on the job, forget everything you learn, kid, in the academy, because it doesn't apply in the street, to everything you learn in the academy is going to apply in the street. So that's the biggest change with our recruits.
So one of the things I also want to talk about is in-service used to just be 1 week long, right? It was a 40-hour kind of, you go to it, you work, you're through. One of the things we did, not just because of the hours we have to train now, but also the ability to reinforce concepts multiple times, because we all know like learning diminishes as time passes. So now we break it down into smaller modules 2 to 3 times throughout the year. So we're able to kind of reinforce certain concepts throughout. And that's something that we've seen is kind of successful, because when we reevaluate and we relook at it, we're seeing the continued success and the knowledge that may have deviated had we wait 1 year again to bring them back in. So
the other thing is the learning management system that we have. We're able to preload and send things out. That way officers already have a knowledge of what the training is going to be, and they're coming with a knowledge and questions already at hand. So that speeds up the process of learning. So the LMS, the preload we send out, is very valuable.
Commissioner Benito again?
Thank you. That was so helpful. One question, one thing that we've talked a little bit about is how all the work of all of these different committees are going to work together, right? Like, there's going to be things that, goals that we have as a commission, in conjunction also with some of your goals that are going to touch the policy committee, they're going to touch outreach, they're going to touch accountability, they're going to touch training. And, one thing that I've been thinking about is when we look at different issues that we're, or goals that we have, right, how do we delineate, is this a policy issue where the policy maybe isn't quite working and maybe that needs to be tweaked, or is it a training issue where maybe there needs to be more training or retraining? And I'm curious how you guys at the division do that. If, how you look at, maybe a goal that you guys have, and what are the red flags for you that tell you, I think this is a training issue versus a policy issue or a discipline issue, that kind of thing?
Okay, so I'll break it into 2 things. So retraining is kind of determined by generally the chief through the evaluation of whatever matter, right? Whatever's being reviewed, say an accident, say it an injury, say it use of force. That process, the retraining, would be directed to the training section. So we receive that from the chief's office or a recommendation of a supervisor. How we look at it through a systemic training issue, right? In the annual needs assessment is one of the things I try to incorporate using some of the data, some of the things we've received, right? The community survey was an excellent resource that I could come in and take a look at and incorporate into that needs assessment. And we try to let the data point us in a direction. You've had the data team come talk to you, you've seen it. Some areas of our statistics are just not statistically significant that we can really pull an inference out of. A true grounded thing that we could say this is what the training is. But I kind of look at it as if we don't look at anything, we have nothing to guide ourselves on, right? We're a rudderless boat, just training on anything we can. So we try to look at what is present there and then just use common general knowledge and discussion to get us into that direction, right? And a lot of it is communication with officers coming through training. A lot of it is just communication with individuals we encounter, throughout the various things to try to get us in that right direction. But unfortunately, there's nothing like no golden arrow that puts us there. But we're using sources we've never used in the past to try to help us there. So that's one of the ways we look at it. But we try I try to stay away from this isolated incident is going to drive training for a division, unless we have something to really point us that this is a systemic training need for the division, because it's very limited time we have to provide training, right? Because removing them to train them removes them from their duties in the street or in their units or wherever. So we have to be very cognizant of the limited time and availability we have to use them for training.
Another thing we've been doing is we're going through the training and the scenarios, and we're documenting errors that officers make. If we see a significant error that's going through and everybody's making it, we'll incorporate it in next year's training. We'll remediate that person, but we'll incorporate it into next year's training scenario somehow. So we'll see if that problem was fixed from us remediating that person right there on the spot.
I believe one was just finger on the trigger, right?
Finger on the trigger.
Commissioner Benito, one more question.
One last one. I know you guys know I love questions. Okay, my last question, I promise. But now I got myself. Oh, yes. I do a lot of training as part of my job. I train mental health professionals, and one thing that when looking at like a large organization, our organization is 300 people, so not as many people as the Division of Police is trying to train. But one thing that we've struggled with is we have some like foundational training that we try to get everyone through, but then we, delve into more specialized training, maybe based on the needs that we're seeing, right? And then the problem becomes that then when staff turns over, right, or we have new people come on, right, they get some of those fundamentals, but then they don't get some of those ongoing. And just in what I've seen so far, there's a lot of training that division officers get that are more about specialized communities or specialized needs, or that's even an area where you see a lot of mental health training come up, like, for example, the suicide in service. So then when you have new officers that are joining, how do you then take some of those kind of the in-service trainings? Obviously they can't then, you can't do the last 10 years worth of in-service trainings every time you bring in a new class. So, when some of the trainings that are around serving specific communities, and especially certain, more high-risk communities or marginalized communities, how are you making sure, how do you guys balance that? Obviously these are important topics, but you then can't the next year have the same in-service because everyone already did that in-service last year.
Well, when we have new recruits come in, it's certain topics that are critical, like the use of force, search and seizure, that the whole division go through. Towards the end of their training, once they comprehend how that works, we put them through scenarios and we put them through the same exact training, so they'll get that knowledge. So those important topics like that, we do institute that, and that's how sometimes the hours keep building at our recruits. They used to have 6 months of training, they're now like 7.5 months. Yes, because we look at that and say this is critical and they need to know this. So we put that training on.
It's about 300 So the state mandates about 741 hours. We provide about an extra 353 hours of training. So somewhere around there. So there's a significant amount of additional training. And a lot of that is what we've provided through annual in-service.
Thank you. I'm stopping.
I have one quick question. You guys do online training with OPATA? On their website?
Yes.
The officers do it too?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. So a part of the state mandates is that those modules. So this year we're going to use, I believe we're using 16 hours of ours, and then we're using 8 hours of state mandated training.
Okay.
That is legal, arrest,
Search and seizure,
and I can get the topics.
There's a lot of topics on that website.
Yeah, there's a lot there, but
By schools.
Yes.
yeah, but we are completing the state mandates using their online system, but in addition, our training as well.
Okay.
So,
and we don't know how many hours until they tell us at the beginning of the year how many hours we're going to train.
Okay. Any other questions for the officers? Mr. Adams?
I guess I just wanted to for the public and for other members of the committee, Commander Magooth and I have been in contact. I know he was on vacation out of the country, so we're gonna meet, and the whole, I think the goal of the meeting is to make sure that the goals that we have as a committee are clearly expressed to Commander Magooth, and then vice versa. That whatever their needs and their objectives are, that we're clear and on the same page, and that we're working together for a common goal. But in light of what Commissioner Co-Chair Ridgway expressed about the monitoring team and sort of these priorities, I do think it would be the right thing to do would be for us to make these priorities for us as well.
Yeah.
And so when we meet, I think we should discuss sort of how do we ensure that we're working on these 3 areas that has been identified, which is use of force, crisis intervention, and search and seizure. And then I also just wanted to sort of ask if it would be possible, as like hearing you talk about the scenarios and how effective it is, and I wanted to know if it would be possible that if we could at some point maybe plan like a community meeting, and it might be nice for the community to actually see like how are police being trained on use of force. If you have the scenarios, how are they being trained on search and seizure? Like it might be a good thing to do, because one of the things we talked about at our meeting was that there is this this distrust, right, between the community and the police, and that would give us an opportunity to, I think, maybe like repair some of that trust and build it, and it would also give the community an opportunity to provide like real-time feedback. So I think we can hit a lot of things with that, but I don't know if you guys would be open to that. But it just popped into my head as you were talking that we could accomplish a lot of things with something like that. And then, in the back of our heads, I hate seeing that chart, non-compliance. And I think it would help us get into compliance with that aspect of several aspects of the consent decree as well.
Chairwoman Ridgeway, please.
Yes, again, I want to go through what do you call this? The Chair Pro Tem. Chair Pro Tem. When you talk about scenario training that reality training, whatever, I had an opportunity last month, well, actually it was this month in June, the first week in June, to take a webinar on the use of force in affecting arrest that was done by NACO. And they focused a lot on scenario training and said that, in doing an assessment of what police are doing across the country, they're realizing that lectures are not enough, that this scenario, this reality training, that is really critical. And they actually had demonstrations, showing this, both good and bad. When use of force is employed and how it could be perceived as bad, and then when use of force can be done in a positive way that will really de-escalate a situation rather than escalate it. So that's a good thing to hear you say, that that's one of the significant changes that has been made within our police department, is to move it from so much lecture and an actual scenario or reality-based training module. So thank you for that.
I just wanted to say thank you for saying our police, because we are together. And I've been trying to get people to see that.
I always say our police.
Yeah, we're together. I hate that adversarial. We're together.
Thank you.
I love to hear people say our police, my police. I love that. So thank you.
Any other questions? No? Go ahead.
And I just, the priority, I just want, like, if it's helpful, there are mandates that we have to conduct a training annually. And those are search and seizure, use of force, bias-free, community problem-oriented policing, CIT, and firearms requalification, 16 hours. So those are the mandates that annually we have to provide the quality, quantity, type, and scope. So just so you're aware, firearms, I believe, is the only one that has an actual hour requirement. So.
Commissioner Finito?
Is it possible for us to take, I would love to be able to experience one of the scenario, like virtual.
Sorry.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
We are happy to, right? So we have numerous scenarios. We have some force on force. We have some no force on force, right? We try to deviate it. The stress level when we put someone in a force on force scenario, it really goes up. And even with our trained officers, it happens. We recognize it. So we always have that to offer if someone wants to try, or even without the force on force, with just, just simulated, is welcome to participate in any of that aspects. We also have a TI simulator where it's a screen that plays and we can walk you through something. So that's an open invite. So.
do you think we would do that as a group, or would it be kind of like an individual, we reach out to you and?
I would recommend smaller numbers, just because it'll be easier for us to watch what is going on. When you have a big group, and it's something we're experiencing, and we're actually downsizing some of our unserviced numbers, is because there's a lot of downtime for people who really aren't going through it. You can watch it, but if you haven't went through it yet, we don't want you to watch it, right? So it's one of those, it's the curse of scenario-based training, right? So we try to get worksheets out to people to help, to help give them something to do while they're waiting to go through it. But it's, however, it works out best, we can work through it, so.
Yeah, the only thing is the downtime with the scenario-based training, but it's very effective. Like you said, the stress level's up there, and you're acting.
And we could maybe take a group and set up some different modules, right? So we don't have as much downtime, but we would have to work on something with, because we are doing training as well. So we have to work out a date that works.
Any other comments, questions? None? I guess we will open it up to a public comment. No public comments? Is there any other business?
Just maybe to the chair, a few items. Before we are out of here, I just wanted to say again that the grant applications for the grant applications are live. You can go on the CPC website. And if anyone's interested, you can read about them and you can apply if you're interested. The other thing that I just wanted to say about that is that the Budget and Grants Committee decided that we would do 2 informational sessions. One will be on July 6th. That will be Thursday, July 6th. That will be during the day. And then there will be another informational session on the 13th, and that will be in the evening. They will be virtual. And then we are also encouraging members of the community who would like some assistance or any additional help on applying for grants to contact the CPC office and set up a meeting where you can receive that additional help either in person or virtually, whatever is best for the community members. And I think that all we really need to do is figure out when we can meet regularly.
Yeah.
So I don't know what works for people. Is the time 6 o'clock? Is that a good time? Can we do earlier? I prefer earlier if possible, but I know people work and I don't know what everyone's schedule looks like.
Oh, I thought I had to be formally. Anyway, 6 o'clock is fine for me. The only issue I may have is Wednesdays. I need to look at my work set. I mean, we could put it down for Wednesday right now. If I have to make an adjustment, I'll do that. But 6 o'clock is fine. I don't get off work at 4:30, so it's hard for me to get here before 6.
So to the chair, are you looking at once a month on a Wednesday? And if so, which Wednesday of the month? So we know the.
I you said Wednesdays were bad.
I said they may be.
Yeah.
I need to look at my
Okay.
work schedule. On top of my head, I know I have a few things
Then what's the
on
point?
Wednesdays, but
We have all the other days too.
I kind of like the middle of the week.
Do you want Wednesday?
I do, but I'm just saying, I would like to, like I said, we could make it Wednesday and I'll just have to make adjustments. But 6 o'clock is definitely fine.
So the only Wednesday options, obviously, we don't have is the 4th, right? Because that's our reoccurring larger meeting. So otherwise, we can pick either the first, second, or third Wednesday of the month and math it out and see if it works for everybody.
Anybody have a preference for the first or second or third Wednesday?
I think it might be nice if it's not the 3rd, because just in case we have something that we're then sending to the full commission for like a vote, then there's some time to be able to send it and them to review it.
Second Wednesday, does that work for people? And we can all, if we have to make an adjustment, I know that we're just doing this on the fly, but if we have to make an adjustment, we can make the adjustment and then we could just announce it to the public if we have to change it.
And we might have to make an adjustment in July. Because the chairs are working on having a makeup meeting for to finish some business we had on the 12th, correct?
Yeah, I would suggest that for July, we meet on the third Wednesday because the first Wednesday will be July 5th. And so some people might be traveling or something.
So that would be the 19th.
Yeah. And then go to the second Wednesday after that, starting in August.
And time, did we say 6? Okay.
Would 5:30 work for you? No, 6 is better. Okay, 6 is fine.
I would like people like rushing.
I mean, I do work around the corner.
Yeah, but like sometimes you don't really get out of work on time. You know, things happen. So I would prefer people to have the time. So, you know, everyone needs a little bit of downtime. So even if it's, you know, I just think that's important. And then I think we can do this next month, but I want us to think about a public meeting, maybe like maybe the August meeting that we have, maybe we can have that somewhere and we can work on maybe having that in the public instead of having it here. But that's just something to think about and we can talk about that next month.
Chair, you know, that would be, I know you had asked if the trainers could come and do something with the public. Maybe that meeting, if you do it in a public setting in the community, and if it jives with their schedule, maybe that would be a good time for some kind of demonstration and conversation with the public.
And to the chair, so I think that's a very creative idea, particularly since use of force is on our topic of priority, right? To get some feedback from the public and then have them maybe go through some scenarios. It would take some planning. So that would be something I recommend that you, similar to what you did with budgets and grants, create a work group, put a few people on it to plan this thing. And we can pick a date maybe in the next 45 days where we might be able to have a special meeting that the division would be able to host something for a community, go through some scenarios, you know, talk about use of force, get some feedback from the community on the policies they use. I think it's a creative way to do it. It's an interactive way to do it, and it's never been tried before. So I'm all for that idea you had, and so if you create that work group tonight, we can get to planning that.
Is it appropriate to have someone from the division on that?
Yes,
work group?
so that's where the work groups are, where we meld community members, division and police people, you know, to you know, you just can't have more than 2 commissioners from one committee on a work group.
I know you want to come back here again.
Yeah, and I think our chair pro tem might be extremely interested in that work group. So.
Sure, whatever.
One note on that is I do think it would be good for us to, as a training committee, experience the simulation thing before that event too. That way it's not like we're experiencing it for the first time at the same time as the public, because we might have feedback that, you know, we might not want to, like combine into one. But that was just a thought that I had.
And the work group can figure that out, right? Come up with a plan, pitch the plan to the committee can approve it, and then we move forward, you know.
That's
So
exciting.
yeah, and Chair Adams has the most experience with the work group thus far. So he's successfully steered a work group all the way to getting grant applications out. So he's good at the work group concept here. So
Who would be interested in participating in the work group besides myself? Mr. Donaldson?
Yeah, I could participate.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
What group called again real quick, sorry?
we'll just call it go ahead. You can name it. Use of force planning. Yeah, use of force event planning or use of force feedback planning, something along those lines. Use of force work group. How's that?
Okay, looks like all of our items of business have been handled. Any other questions or concerns? If not, I would go ahead, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, I did have one thing I wanted to just clarify. So, John, you sent us an email last month about the 2024 training and the draft. being completed by the end of July. Is there anything we need to look at or work on for that, or like where are we with that part? I just want to make sure.
I think that's probably a question for Commander Magoo, because I mean, this committee could work a couple of ways. We can wait for a little more collaboration from the TRC, where like last time he sent us some things and we reviewed them, or depending on how that's going, we can also prioritize things that we think are important. We already have 3 priorities. But I guess the question then would be, where are you all with sending us more materials? I do remember us speaking about the training being completed by the end of July. So it is now June 21st. Where is that date going to get moved, or basically where are we with the end of July deadline, and when can we expect more materials?
So it's kind of, I'll try to answer that the best I possibly can. So session 3 is going to contain the integrated reality training, the session that we talked about. That will be completed by the end of this week. So that will be submitted to the training review committee. So it'll be sent out for the review process. So you should receive it Friday evening, Monday morning, right? It just depends on that time frame of when it gets finalized. But that will be the next material that comes across. The next will be the second look at the material that we've already looked at, right? So the subject control, the health and wellness, and then the district training awareness after the feedback's incorporated into it.
And then so the July deadline or the date, is that like a loose date, or is it?
It's yes. So everything has to, so we'll learn very quickly, I hope, everything has to remain kind of flexible. I hate to do that. It's just the reality, right? Like we planned and intended to start session 3 earlier. Well, we had to kind of adjust our current session 2, which actually extended 2 out. So now 3 is getting pushed back, right? Especially with OPATA mandates, because sometimes we don't receive them. So we'll do our training plan for the year ahead, which will be completed this year, of what we're going to train next year. But there are times where we don't get the state mandated training until, the end of Q1 of the next year. So maybe March or April, we'll actually get what the state is going to have us to train. So then we have to kind of amend to make sure we're using the right amount of hours, because maintaining the state certification with firearm requalification and any type of continuing professional training mandates issued by the state, we have to do. Otherwise, we go into what's called cease function, and you cannot perform the duties of a police officer if officers don't complete that training. So we always try to prioritize to get that completed. So just so you know.
And just a follow-up, did you say district awareness training is on the review schedule currently?
Correct. It's a refresher. So this training was actually done at each district prior. I can't recall the date, but it was in the past. There were a couple areas that we wanted to refresh to make sure that officers received it and understood it. So we created an LMS training for those specific areas.
So is that what we used to call the cultural competency in the consent decree? Was that what we decided?
It's a portion of it. It's
Okay.
a portion of it. It's not, but it's more geared towards. So if I work in the first district as an officer, I understand that district. So they all kind of share the cultural competency aspects of it, but then there's individual considerations given to each district area. And it's required for any officer going to that district to have that training done. So,
Okay.
hopefully that helps.
And then I guess one last request is, because we know these 3 areas that have been identified by the monitor, so I would like to push to make those priorities. If you have that, even if it's just like it needs to be revised, would it be possible for us to get a copy, a draft, or whatever you have currently on those 3 issues, so that we can start to do some work in those 3 areas?
For search and seizure, use of force, and CIT.
Yeah.
So I'll check. I don't believe CIT, well, we already have it done for this year for suicide. As soon as it's developed, But I assume it probably won't be developed either until later this year or early next year is when we'll actually see the draft of that. Similarly, I'm hoping to get out the drafts for next year's in-service, like the integrated reality, which incorporates search and seizure use of force into that module by the end of this year as well. So as soon as they're done, I'm happy to put them through the TRC, and that's where you'll receive them. And then if you want me to kind of send it, separately, but it kind of goes at the same thing right there. But yeah, as soon as they're completed, I'm happy to share it. So.
And to the chair, just to refresh, use of force policy is 5 separate policies that covered under the consent decree. So we'll probably see bits and pieces of the training related to specific parts of use of force come at us in the next 18 months at different time periods. So depending on, there were good work groups around search and seizure. Policy is starting a work group most likely related to, it's secondary to search and seizure around technology. That's an area we haven't tackled in training, right? So there's a blind spot there that I'm sure the division has to look at about some of these new technologies, ShotSpotter. How does that play into it? If they're getting license plate readers, how does that play into it? So there is some need possibly to establish work groups around these specific things related to looking at training and looking ahead, so that when it lays on the desk, we could say, oh, we already discussed this. We know some of the areas that we want to see or are concerned with. So you may want to consider, maybe at your next meeting, thinking ahead about looking at some of these, what you want to tackle, forming a community work group of people who can feed you some knowledge on that and what might bring that training to the next level. So we can request what they already have. People can look at it in advance, and then when it comes down their schedule, we're ready for that. So we're like, okay, we already talked about this. We know kind of the areas we want to direct attention to and work on.
Question from Chair
I
Whitford.
just want to add a comment, and that is that we will probably be piggybacking on some areas. One of the things we have talked about is doing a couple of informational sessions with the public so they can understand the work we do, looking at the consent decree. So we had talked at our last leadership meeting about identifying, not taking from the first page of the consent decree, working through it, but looking at areas that our work, where we're doing the work. And we would do a community information session, just talking to people, have them talk to us so that we all understand what the work is. So I can see some of these areas, especially those 3 areas that are part of the consent decree. Like you mentioned 5 sessions of one area. Those are some of the topics that we could discuss with the public when we are educating themselves, educating ourselves and them about the consent decree. So I think that would be a wonderful way to piggyback, and we can, and I always hate these expressions where the animal rights people would get me, but my dad would say we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Benito.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to just say that we've been working on use of force since 2017. So when you looking at what we're doing, it's going to be at a higher level of what we're training at. So because we've been doing it for a long time, unless we found a problem through the assessment, we're looking at higher up levels of skills with the officer, adding more to it. So like Mr. Goodrich said, that you will see certain parts of the policy. You won't see the whole thing because we trained on the whole thing, but we start hitting on higher level. We want our officers to increase their knowledge. And so we've been increasing since 2017, just so you will know, you might not see the whole policy.
One thing that I wanted to also touch on is that I want to make sure that we're careful to not always say CIT when we mean crisis intervention or mental health, because CIT is a specific team of people who have gone through the specialized CIT training, which is that 40-hour mental health training. But the truth is that all of our officers are engaging with people that are having mental health crisis or, that are experiencing mental illness. not just that specific pool of officers. And so I think sometimes you hear out in the community, and I've also heard this in the commission a little bit, is just using CIT as a placeholder for anything to do with mental health and crisis. And that's, I think that I just want to make sure that we're not doing that. So, but one thing that I asked in one of the last MRAC meetings was, and a question that you may have remembered me bringing up before in one of our meetings was, what percentage of the time that there, because as you might remember, all calls that, whether they start as a crisis call or not, all officers are filling out that crisis form, the crisis sheet. What's the name of the crisis sheet? Do you remember?
The application's called Brazos,
Oh, yeah.
but
They
they call it a
get checked.
CIT form.
CIT form, yeah. So regardless of who's responding, they fill out a CIT form when there was something in the call was connected to a crisis or a mental health crisis. So one thing that I was wondering was what percentage of the time that these sheets are being filled out are officers who have gone through that CIT or who are CIT officers are responding. And I did get an answer on this, which was really exciting. And so the first year after they implemented the CIT program, 10.5% of officers of the calls that came in that were eventually, they filled out that Brazos form, were CIT trained officers. In 2021, that number went up to 17.08%. In 2022, that number went up to 31.74%. And then year to date so far, this would have been June 9th, year to date was 37.2%. So we are seeing real progress into the amount of times, that there is a crisis situation where either CIT officers are being dispatched or they're being called in through a request for assistance. But I think that even though 37.2% is great progress, that also means that, 60% of the time, or more than 60% of the time, officers who have not gone through this training are the ones dealing with crisis situations. So that's why I think it's really important that we're not just thinking about CIT as that it takes care of all mental health, because it's meant to be a specialized program that a percentage of the officers are going through. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or concerns?
Okay.
I'd like to thank the officers for coming today, giving us your input. Anything else? Any other?
I'd just like to congratulate our chair pro tem on an excellent reign.
Thanks. I'd like to congratulate our permanent chair now. Turn the gavel over to you. Will you get a motion to adjourn now?
Move to adjourn.
All right.
Good job.
You adjourn.
Good job, everybody. Sorry for all my questions.
No,
Poor
you're
Greg's
not.
gonna start.